This is a cost curve developed by Nick Lutze of UC Davis. He was particularly interested in transportation sector reductions. So you see the same values on the axes, that is dollar per ton of reduction. Here, Nick has made it clear that we're talking about 2008 dollars. We're still talking about ton of carbon dioxide equivalent. And he's highlighted with some coloring here transportation sector reductions, but the other reductions come from other sectors. This includes our residential and commercial buildings. It includes fossil fuel-related fuel switching. It includes things like carbon capture and storage, whereby large power plants are actually capturing the greenhouse gas emissions coming out of their smokestacks and storing that underground. It includes renewable power. It includes nuclear power. And it, of course, includes a lot of vehicle energy efficiency investments. I want to quickly jump to the next slide, which shows exactly the same curve with now a new line on it. That gray line there is defined as initial cost accounting. That is, this is the cost, this is the money you have to spend to enjoy the net benefits that you ultimately will enjoy from these investments. So you see the thick line is the lifetime cost accounting, and what that does is it subtracts out the energy savings or the avoided utility bill savings. So, for example, we could also look at solid waste management measures, and to the extent that you can, as a commercial interest, increase the amount of composting and recycling you're doing and reducing the amount of waste you're sending to landfills, that will both reduce your utility bills in terms of solid waste management, and it will also, of course, avoid an enormous amount of greenhouse gas emissions. So it's not just electricity savings we're looking at here. It's other utility bill savings as well. Another great example, of course, is water. Installing low-flow fixtures in place of old, very high-flow fixtures. I'm talking now about sinks and toilets and urinals. It's not exactly a glamorous topic, but it can save a lot of money from the perspective of the building owner or operator, and it can also avoid greenhouse gas emissions. A number to get your head around. About 20% of the electricity we use here in California is to move, process, and deliver water. So if you can reduce your water use, you're helping California fight global warming. And you're also improving your utility bill. In this context, of course, your water utility bill. So there are a lot of reasons why these energy efficiency measures are not being implemented to a larger scale. I want to get to that in a moment. I want to highlight a couple of the findings that are suggested by the cost curves I've just shown you. First is it's feasible to achieve our 2020 goals with known technologies. Second, it looks like we can get to our goal at a price of somewhere around $50 per ton or lower. Now, I'm hedging there because a lot of it depends on, for example, the extent to which we allow offsets to be used for compliance. If you're not familiar with the term offsets, go ahead and raise your hand now electronically, and we'll get a sense of how much time I should spend clarifying that concept. But an offset is essentially a reduction that's achieved by a sector that's not within the cap-and-trade program, but then can be utilized by a regulated entity within the cap-and-trade program to meet its compliance obligation. Generally speaking, offsets reductions can be expected to be lower cost than reductions within cap sectors, and that's why we would consider allowing them. They, of course, must be very high quality. That is, we need to ensure the environmental performance of the program, and thus we need to ensure that offsets are very high quality before we allow them to be credited into that program. I want to move on to two more cost curves slides. The next one is titled U.S. Mid-Range Abatement Curve 2030. I want to note that we've now changed our scale of analysis out to 2030. This is a slide produced by McKinsey & Company about a year ago. It again shows a considerable amount of net economically beneficial reductions. Now we're looking at the full nation, not just the state of California. And I want to go fairly quickly to the next slide, which shows this one again and highlights, again, some of the great opportunities that we see in terms of the economics of commercial and residential interests that are highlighted here in the McKinsey curve. Home electronics, home lighting, commercial electronics, commercial lighting, fuel economy, both in terms of trucks and cars, and commercial heat and power. All of these things, commercial and home building shell improvements, will save more money than they cost, and these are the things that our commercial interests, whether or not you're a regulated entity, should be seriously considering. I want to mention that McKinsey came out with a new study finding it's titled Unlocking Energy Efficiency in the U.S. Economy. And that study finds that the U.S. could save about $1.2 trillion in energy bills with an initial investment, initial being over the timeline through 2020, of about $500 billion. So this is a 2-to-1 payback, and it can avoid about 23% of our business as usual energy use into 2020. This is a huge opportunity for our nation, and one not to be missed. This could translate into about 1 gigaton of avoided carbon dioxide emissions per year. McKinsey, I'll note, came out with 5 recommendations about how to enjoy these benefits. First is to recognize the important role that energy efficiency can play while developing clean energy sources as well. And this is something that we have done as part of our AB 32 scoping plan. Second is to formulate and implement portfolio approaches. That is, whole household or whole commercial building approaches rather than one-off appliance or efficiency measure investments. We could really reduce our administrative and transactions costs by thinking about delivering portfolios. Another important point that they mention, and that I've already mentioned, is we need to identify upfront funding methods. We need to forge better alliances between our utilities, our government agencies, regulators, manufacturers, and consumers. And last, we need to inspire the next wave of innovation in energy efficiency. I'll note that by putting a price on greenhouse gas emissions, which is what AB 32 does when it develops its cap and trade program, will provide that innovation inspiration. The next slide I want to get to shows how the various measures that are laid out in our AB 32 scoping plan over time translate into significant reductions. You'll see that this is a colorful slide, and I would just suggest that after this conversation or after I get through my slides, you might want to go back and take a look at this and ask which of these kinds of measures relate to your operations and which of these measures could actually be entrepreneurial opportunities. Next, on the topic of what commercial interests can do, I'll move on to a slide that is titled Veritable Vegetable, Doing Well by Doing Good. Veritable Vegetable is a women-owned wholesale vegetable operation. They provide vegetables to 5-star restaurants and to retail supermarkets here in the Bay Area. And what they have done is made significant investments in lighting, refrigeration, of which they have a considerable amount because they have to store vegetables, to the extent that they're avoiding about 70 tons of greenhouse gas emissions per year. You see in this graphic here that they've reduced their electricity usage dramatically by making these investments, and at the same time they've grown profits. What you don't see in this picture is they've actually doubled their warehousing space during this timeline, but still managed to see a dramatic decline in their energy usage during the year of 2007 when they made these lighting improvement investments. I'll mention also that they also put photoelectric panels on their roofs of their commercial operations, which is a very attractive investment for commercial interests because you can get the tax benefits as well as the avoided energy use going forward. I want to take a moment to mention some of the work that EDF has done on the green economy. Now you're seeing on their slide a cover for a report that we produced called Manufacturing Climate Solutions. And what that does is it looks vertically at 5 burgeoning technologies such as wind turbines and LED lights, and looks vertically at how those are produced, what parts go into those, and where those jobs are being generated here in the United States. I'm going to move on. I wanted to bring that to your attention, but didn't want to spend too much time on it. We've also been busily mapping California's green economy. So going on to the next slide, you'll see I've provided you with a URL where you could go, and that's a searchable database that shows business listings by zip code here in California. And I've listed here some of the businesses that are shown. We've actually focused on just these 4 sectors. But you could actually, if you consider yourself to be a green business, whether or not you're in this sector, you can actually nominate yourself to be on this map.